Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. All right, dear listeners, New Year's is upon us, and you may be thinking about your resolutions. And if you're like me, at some point, you may have written out too many resolutions or created too high a bar to reach within those resolutions, and later found out that few of them were actually carried out. I decided to take a look at those resolutions and consider a potentially more effective way to write them. I'm talking about aspirations for growth instead of the rigidity of resolutions paired with small and reasonable improvements. At least that is the topic of this episode with my very special guest and friend of the podcast, New York Times best-selling author, AJ Jacobs. AJ is the author of great books like My Year of Living Biblically, The Know-It-All, and most recently, The Puzzler. All are must-reads, and I've read many of his books 2 or more times. This is AJ's third visit, and upon reflection, it's his third visit because he represents so much of what this podcast is all about from a values perspective. The values he seems to live by and rock in his life are the same ones I attempt to embed in my own life, and they are certainly drivers for this podcast. You'll hear what they are, but to give you an advance on those 4 values, they are fun, curiosity, drive for excellence, and kindness. These are perfect for driving your New Year's aspirations. So sit back and listen as AJ and I have something akin to a jam session on New Year's aspirations. AJ Jacobs, a hearty welcome back to Super Psyched.
What an honor.
It's just way too much fun. And in our last episode, when we were talking about your book, which I absolutely adored and have given to so many people to help them figure out problem solves through puzzling, as well as to people who love puzzling.
Thank you.
The Puzzler, Adam. As I was saying when we were talking about that wonderful book back in June, that getting to hang with you is like being a kid again, going to your best buddy's house. He's just got the new Mattel toy and he's about to unbox it with you. So since this is going to be the year-end episode, and many people are probably coming up with New Year's resolutions, one of the cool things about you is you make all kinds of resolutions, whether to read the entire Encyclopedia Britannica, to try every health fad, to live according to the Bible, to the letter in the Old Testament for a year. You actually carry out some of the funniest of resolutions, much to your own edification. Like, this contributes to a better life. Hence, you are my poster boy. You are full of levity and fun. You're full of curiosity. You're a kind and good person. And you have a hunger for self-improvement. So I think those 4 basic attributes are pretty much everything this show's about.
I love the show, so it makes perfect sense. And I listen to it to improve. That's one of my strategies. Listen to Super Psyched to get better.
I'm so honored. So, lest I continue to blather on, I am going to ask you the first question, and that is, what might a person, when they are considering drafting their own New Year's aspirations, I'm going to call them aspirations rather than resolutions, what would be some of your tips for someone going through that?
Well, you know that one of my mottos is I just love experimenting with life. I like to try new things out because I do think that's the way you improve. And that's the way you get out of your mental ruts. So yeah, maybe there are resolutions or aspirations. I like that a lot because resolution sounds so harsh, but aspiration, you just try. You can't be sure that you're going to succeed. All you can do is try. So your New Year's attempt should be maybe to try a bunch of new things. And you could even just say, make it general, try a bunch of new things, or you can make it specific. Like, I'm going to try 18 different cuisines this year. I'm going to try to do a week without gossiping this year. So that's the way I would approach it. But of course, I don't want to say that's the way you have to, but that's the way I approach my New Year's aspirations.
I just had this visual in my mind as you were talking of a person walking through a big box store like Costco and trying on different things. Now, this is, of course, not literal, but metaphoric, like going through the aisles and saying, yeah, just as you said, I'll try not gossiping. One of my buddies tried not swearing. Another one of my friends, to the point of cuisine, decided to literally go through every country in alphabetical order and each week make cuisine from that country.
Oh, that's brilliant.
That would be my buddy, idea. Matt Prull, who was in my garage band in high school. He's now a cognitive psychologist who teaches at Whitman College. But it's like such a cool idea. He's actually also a former guest on the podcast talking about cognitive psychology.
And wait, did he say every letter? Was that it?
Every country in alphabetical order. I believe he's currently on P. I think Panama.
Wow, he's done well.
Yeah, he's done really. I mean, he's really doing it. And that's
such
a total HHC Cubs move.
I know. I'm a little bit jealous. I love it.
Totally. Okay. So I love this idea of trying. And what you're also suggesting, and you and I are both seeming to vibe on the idea of aspirations versus kind of these hard resolutions, which are kind of binary. You either hit them or you don't. But I like this idea because embedded in the algorithm for your strategy is failure. The idea that failure is possible, if not probable. Can you talk about your relationship with failure? Because I think you must have failed a lot in order to get done all these things that you've gotten done.
Oh, yeah, no. And I continue to fail all the time. And I am a big fan of failure. And actually, a friend of mine was just talking about, she was making a failure resume, just like a collection of all her failures. I thought that was a fun idea. I don't know where you'd send it. But yes, I preach that to my kids, that whatever you do, you're going to fail and fail before you succeed. And maybe you won't even ever get to the succeed. So you just have to become comfortable with it. And one of my favorite morning rituals is that I spend 10 to 15 minutes just brainstorming ideas every morning. And I love it. But 99% of the ideas are crap. And I am well aware of that. They are just unusable. No one's ever going to see them. But to get to those 1 or 2%, which are gems, it's a numbers game. You got to just churn it out. And I feel the same way about most things. You know, another friend of mine had a good point about failure and rejection, which was, he's single. So this doesn't really apply to me in the dating world, but I think it applies to me in the business world, which is, he argues that when we were in our little 150 person tribe or whatever Dunbar's number is, that if you approach someone who you were romantically interested in and you got rejected, that's huge because that's one out. And that's a reputation stainer. But I live in a city with 8 million people. So if I were single and, I got rejected, who cares? One's ever, I'll probably never see that person again. And I'll just move on. So our hard wiring is designed to make rejection a much bigger deal than it should be, because there are so many options in this world right now, so many different paths you can take. So if you get rejected from one, we are lucky enough that you can try 1,000 others.
Absolutely. And that applies to everything in life, whether it's getting your book published, in your case, whether it's applying for a job that you really want. It's a numbers game. We all theoretically know that. And yet one of the other coexisting realities is the fact that rejection hits our pain centers in our brain as much as physical pain. And so we are wired. I love that idea that we were in tribes of 150. And if 0.6% of that tribe, just that one person rejected us, it would have a ripple effect on our reputation, and that we've been wired to avoid it. What I used to say is, if I could go back in time and whisper something into my ear as a younger person, it would be tolerate rejection. That would be the thing I would say.
Absolutely.
And failure, oh my gosh, and recognize that failure is really a verb. It's not a noun. And let's get moving again.
Right. Something that might seem like a failure could turn out to be a success. And also as a writer, I always have to have that second head, which is trying to say, well, what can I do with this failure to make it into a story that I can use or that might help other people? So I've got that rationalization. Because I remember from my first book, I don't know if I've told you this story, but my first book, I sent out the proposal and my agent called and said this one publisher was interested, but they wanted to see a photo of me. This was way before Google Images. So I went to Walmart and I had a photo taken and I sent it to him. And I was like, why do they even care? And he said, oh, we just want to make sure you don't have two heads so you can appear on a talk show. I was like, all right. So I sent him the photo and like 2 days later, the agent calls back and said, well, they're going to pass. And I was like, what? I'm not good looking enough to be an author? I thought that was one of the few places you didn't have to look
DJ and author.
Yeah. So that was at the time devastating and embarrassing. But now I love to tell the story. And I've included it in at least one of my books. And I think it's illuminates, how crazy superficial business can be sometimes, that they care about looks. And it's just, a good example for my kids. Like, this is super humiliating, but now I've taken ownership of it. And weirdly, the publishing company that did that to me is Crown. And I recently switched to Crown as my publisher. So like it came full circle. And I told them that story when I decided to sign up with them. They were like, oh, that wasn't us. So we feel terrible about that. So yeah,
wow.
It was a nice little full circle there.
That is such a great story. And one of the things that you're speaking to, one of the facets of failure that we may overlook is that someday this failure will become a great story in all likelihood. Like, it adds to character, adds to wisdom, and it adds to our storybook. One of my favorite stories about failure was a friend of a friend was applying for a job and they said, we're really excited. We're 99% sure we're going through with you. Weeks go by, he calls back and he says, did I get it? And they said, no. They said, but you said 99% sure. And they not only rejected him, but said, now you know the difference between 99 and 100. And it's like, not only are we going to reject you, but we're going to insult you. So that's a great story.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's terrible. But it sounds like he did just fine, right?
He ultimately, yes, he found his true north. It's so amazing. Even as well as I know this material, I am not immune to becoming very occluded in my vision. If I see something go sideways, there is that primitive brain that will say, oh my gosh, you are so royally screwed. You're failing and everyone will know it. And it's fine. I find the resources to deal with the thing and it's fine. I overestimate.
I mean, I've built up a whole arsenal of strategies to try to clear up that occluded, diluted vision. And one that I'm loving that started out as an experiment of just a week. I said, I'm going to talk to myself for a week and I'm going to speak my thoughts out loud. And I have kept that up for over a year now. So this past year has kind of been the year of talking to myself out loud because it is just what you say. When I say a thought like, oh, that's the end of my life, this newspaper rejected me and no one's going to buy my articles ever again. And when I hear myself say it out loud, then I wake up and I'm like, oh yeah, that is kind of crazy. But if I don't say it out loud, my brain just goes off into dark corners and it gains energy. But once I say it out loud and hear how ridiculous it is, then I'm able to snap back and say, okay, let's remember that's some crazy talk right there.
That's a really good cognitive strategy. I remember when I was in junior high school, my mom taught me a similar thing as it relates to your field. When you write something, read it out loud.
Yeah,
how does it sound? Too. And now you're actually saying you use that when you have a cognitive distortion, when you have distorted thinking and you hear yourself. There's something about the act of actually hearing you, even if you're speaking to you.
Right.
That makes all the difference.
I think it's because I'm able to be another person and judge my craziness, which is one of the And I think you've told me this, that the strategy of treating yourself like you would treat a friend and having forgiveness for yourself. And I think it's in the same area. It's like stepping back and saying, all right, if I were someone else, how would I be viewing this? And then realizing, oh no, well, I'm just crazy talking.
Yeah, which we all do. And we speak to ourselves in a way that we would speak to no one else. I mean, it would burn bridges and scorch earth if we spoke to others with the eviscerating tones that we use on ourselves. And that self-compassion practice is so important. So to quote Lori Gottlieb, a former guest on my, she says, you're the last person you should be listening to when it comes to you right now. Sometimes don't be listening to you, but you actually found a way around this by actually speaking it out so that you can hear it. I'm going to try that out and ask my clients to see if it works as well.
Try it. And I mean, it's gotten much easier because, I actually tried this 20 years ago and I sort of dropped it. But back then, if you were doing it on the street, people would cross the street to avoid you. But now you can just pretend you're on your AirPods. No big deal.
100%. No one will know and no one will think you're a crazy person for speaking out loud by yourself.
Exactly.
Yes. I remember that transition when I was wearing an earpiece walking through Trader Joe's, for example, and people would see me talking and I'd be on the phone. It's pretty funny. I've been sharing with my listeners a lot about motivational interviewing, which is a brilliant counseling technique that allows the counselor to help tap in to the client's truth. And oftentimes it's used for people who are engaged in behaviors that are not serving them. But of course, their coping strategies, whether it's smoking or drinking or whatever it might be, that are really deeply embedded. And we can say, just say no. We can say, stop smoking. We can say, stop drinking. They're not going to listen, but we will listen to ourselves. And you're essentially doing that. So even though the idea of you're the last person you should be listening to right now, it's a yes and proposition. That's true. And if you do listen to yourself, we do listen to ourselves. And if we do say something that is actually reasonable and helpful, that's great. Of course, there are times when we are absolutely tyrannical to ourselves. So it's
I think that's great. I love that insight. It also speaks to the fact that we have different selves. That can be a good thing because you can have your incredibly overreactive self, and then you can have your more rational, compassionate self who can sort of babysit that overreactive self.
You have a really delightful take on the Native American question about the two wolves that live within us, the good wolf and the bad wolf. Each one can inform us. And you refer to it as your inner Mr. Rogers versus your inner Larry David. And you do your best to listen to take direction from Mr. Rogers.
Exactly. I mean, it is very similar to that Native American idea. But the key is, I love Larry David. I love watching the show. Sure. It's hilarious. But being inside that mindset is just not pleasant. So I'd rather enjoy it while watching TV, but not be inside it. Because it's not a pleasant place to be when you are so good at finding the negative and the paranoia. And we've talked about this before, I think, the idea of the opposite of paranoia, pronoia.
Love.
Something I try to cultivate, and for those who don't remember, it's paranoia is the idea that you think people are out there trying to make your life worse. People are out there plotting against you. Pronoia is the opposite, where you have the sneaking suspicion that there are people out there trying to help you. And even if it's a little delusional, I think it's a much better way to live because there are people out there trying to help you. There are some good people out there. So
I'm with you. And I think that one of the harder challenges in life is when somebody cuts you off, asking yourself, well, how does this serve me? Well, I guess it serves as a set of push-ups for me to do in my mind so that I can override my desire to flip this person off and say that this person is maybe one of the worst people who's ever lived. And can I take a moment, readjust and see it for what it is and recognize that I'm safe? And maybe that person is having a bad day for all I know, and be a little bit more pronoia and saying, that person may be just trying to teach me how to override this instinctual tendency to just react.
That is fantastic. And you know what I love about that is it sort of reminds me of the old idea, God is testing me. So this is actually good. Something hard, when I get fired, God is testing me. As you know, I'm an agnostic, so I can't really fall back on that. But you brought up the sort of the secular version of that, which is, this is good for me. Whatever it is, it's not testing me, but it's giving me an opportunity to get stronger. It's like going to the gym, like a mental gym. So it's giving me an opportunity to build up my compassion or patience or forgiveness. So I love that. It's sort of the God is testing me without the God part.
Totally. And doesn't require secular or non-secular, doesn't really matter. This is just a brain push up. It's really a cognitive exercise no matter what, ultimately. But my buddy Scott and I were going for a walk, and this guy just runs through the stop sign, and that just unleashed all of the anger within me. And he said, wow, that guy must be in a real rush. And I was like, Scott, I would like to be like you. I'm not there yet, but there will come a day when I'm able to respond in that way. So this is one of my, I guess, maybe my New Year's aspirations is like to be more like Scott in this department. That would be good.
But that guy must have something really important to do. It's wonderful that he's getting to get there earlier to tutor some underprivileged people.
So he's doing good.
Yeah, that is a nice way to look at the world. Yeah, I can't do that either quite yet, but it's something to aspire to. Like we were talking before, aspirations.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. I've begun to even formulate some of my own, but I'm curious to hear what you'll say about this. How might a person actually introspect at the inflection point that is the new year and say to themselves, what would really be good? I mean, I could just come up with material and say, I'm not going to have fast food for a quarter, but that might not be tantamount to something really, really important to me. How might a person be able to quietly introspect, dig in, and figure out what would be something of importance for this year?
Yeah, I love that. Well, I will tell you, this is related. It's not exactly, but it is, I think, very similar, which is, as I told you earlier, I am right now working on a semi-sequel to my book, The Year of Living Biblically. And this time I'm doing The Year of Living Constitutionally, because I'm just trying to see how closely should we try to hew to that original Constitution. What are the good parts of that point of view? What are the drawbacks? But one thing that I've loved is reading Ben Franklin, who I think is my favorite founding father. And
Yay!
Me too. Oh, yes.
For sure.
And I just learned from you, so exciting, that he is the author of a book, Fart Proudly. That is huge. Thank you for that important information.
You need gastrointestinal stuff about our founding fathers, you got it.
That is very important. Going right in the book. He wrote I think in his autobiography about sort of his daily ritual and how he plots it out hour by hour, which I think is a helpful way to look at it. It says the first thing he does when he wakes up is he asks himself, what good am I going to try to do today? And then at the end of the day, he asks, what good did I do today? And I have started doing that. And it is lovely. What a great ritual, because it really snaps things into perspective, because you can get caught up with just thinking, I got to check all of these off the to-do list. But really, what is the greater purpose of doing that? Are you doing good? And you don't have to be, I'm very broad and liberal in what I mean by doing good. It doesn't have to be digging wells. You can't fault that, of course. I'd be delighted. But even if it's just spreading kindness to someone, even if it's for yourself, taking a tennis lesson, maybe the good is that you're going to just get 1% better at tennis. But framing it as, how can I at least aspire, as we were saying, to do something that will make a positive difference, and just starting the day with that outlook. And then at the end of the day, analyzing, was I able to do anything, or did I at least try? And that's made a huge difference in my life. So I guess it's the same thing for the year. Start out with the year and saying, what good can I do this year, either for myself, my family, society? Because I do try to think, when I'm making a decision, I often think about, sometimes I even split it up into 4 quadrants. So one quadrant is my happiness and my family's happiness. And then the next quadrant is like, does it benefit the world? And then on the other two quadrants are short term and long term. So something could benefit me in the short term, but it's not really, I could have my fifth martini. That might be good in the short term, but it will not give me long term happiness. So I try to think, when I make a decision, I'm sometimes looking at all four quadrants and how does it affect that? So maybe that's another tool you can use when looking at what you should do during the year. How does it make you personally happy? How does it make your family happy? How does it make the world happy? And are we talking short term or long term?
That is so brilliant. One of my all-time favorite axioms is that the quality of your life depends on the quality of your questions. Shocking. Ben Franklin came up with two of the best questions of all time. What good am I going to do today? And what good did I do today? One of the things that my family does as a ritual around the dinner table, which is a really important part, I believe, of our collective mental health. We do a rose and a bud and a thorn. The rose is what was good today. The bud is what did I learn today? And the thorn is what hurt today. This is going to go in. This may be the replacement, the what good did
I don't want to
today.
replace that because I was just thinking, I want to start the rose.
Okay, then what good did I do today? And maybe in the morning on the way to school, I ask my kids, well, the melatonin is swimming through their heads, just waking up. And I say, hey guys, what good are you going to do today? I'm going to try that out because it came from AJ. It has more cachet. So I think I'll say, guys, it came from AJ. Okay.
It came from Ben Franklin, but channeled through me. I think that gives it even more.
That's right. It came from Ben Franklin and then AJ. So essentially we broke a $100 bill. Okay. I couldn't resist. Okay. And we got the change. That's brilliant. So I'm thinking that one of the things that we could do for the year is ask ourselves to really introspect in what is a dangling thing that I've always wanted to do. Like if I was to put a late year 90 tomorrow, what would I have wished I had done? And my guess is it would be something like engaged in some artistic creative pursuit. It probably would be something like, I wish I'd finally taken up guitar. I wish I had taken those voice lessons. I wish I had tried my hand at poetry or art or photography or whatever it might be. And the idea of the 1% really takes the piss out of it and I like this idea of saying, what if I was to do it? What if I don't need to make it go to the Spinal Tap 11 on the dial? I can rock 1%.
Right.
What if I was to do just a bit of that? We have 168 hours a week. Let's say I put 1.68 hours. That's 1% of 168. What if I put in 1.68 hours? That's about 108 minutes throughout the course of the week. That'd be about 15 and a half minutes a day. What if I put in 15 and a half minutes a day toward this artistic pursuit? Or not even that much since our waking hours are less. But anyway, I'm just putting that out there. I like this idea of the 1%. I like taking the pressure out because it can be so binary. Like, oh, I tried it for a quarter and then I stopped. And well, why did you stop? Because it got hard. Of course it got hard. It always gets hard. Or I wasn't able to as frequently as I thought. And so I just let it go.
So is that the one you're thinking of?
No, that's not one for me. But for me, my big hairy goal, and it is actually fairly binary but at least I want to attempt it. But I'd like to have a book out of me by fall of 2023.
I can't wait to read it. And let me just push back a tiny bit on the binary because I don't think it's totally binary. There are nowadays 100 different ways to get a book out. So there is the traditional publishing, but then there's also these hybrids and there's self-publishing and then there's audio, and maybe don't be so hard on yourself that it has to be a particular type of book.
That's awesome. Yeah. So for sure, it would be dedicating some of my life force towards getting that actually accomplished.
I mean, the goal is not just to have the book. The goal, I'm guessing, is getting your message, your wonderful message out there in a bigger way, in a written form. As long as you achieve that goal, then there are different routes to achieving it that are all in the book spectrum.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I love the fact that there are so many ways of meeting that goal and being creative and flexible about how that end is met. Well, I'm wondering let's say December 31st, 2023, what would be some of your aspirations for this new year, AJ?
That is a good question. One thing that I feel super lucky about my life is that my job is trying all these new things out. So experimenting nonstop. So this year, there's going to be tons to experiment with, whether it's learning calligraphy to try to write like they did in the 1780s or learning the art of rhetoric, whatever it is. So I get an excuse. I kind of have an excuse to do these fun, interesting experiments. But in terms of, let's see, what other aspirations could I try? Well, what we talked about earlier, getting more used to rejection. I am going to try to label people less because I feel that is a dangerous way to go. When I talk about people, I'm going to try not to use nouns, but instead use adjectives or verbs. So for instance, because I tell this to my kids, if someone is a jerk to them, my kids will say, oh, that guy is such an a-hole. And I'll say, no, let's not say that. Let's say that he was acting in an assholic manner. He was acting, at that moment.
In a less than optimal.
Yeah, suboptimal.
Suboptimal.
Because if you label someone as a jerk, you're kind of implying that they're a jerk for life. That is their default. So instead say, at that moment, they were acting like a terrible person. In other moments, they may be wonderful. So I just feel it leaves so much more space for forgiving people and for seeing the complexities of people to not label them as a noun.
And what that does is by not containing them within the constraints of that noun, it recognizes that they have the potential to escape from that. And it's not saying you can't change the stripes of a tiger, but instead you're doing actually what it's funny because I interviewed Daryl Davis, the African-American musician who 200 plus men get out of the Ku Klux Klan. And the way he did that was by not
I love that interview.
And That was a great interview. And he actually used one of the quotes that was attributable to you. At least Tim Ferriss even called his episode with you, Get Curious, Not Furious, because he was so into it. And you use that on my podcast. I was like, damn. But all I can tell you is the Get Curious, Not Furious thing goes perfectly with trying to find adjectives and verbs rather than nouns. I think that's brilliant. And it also implies the possibility that the person wearing that KKK outfit has the potential to get out of that.
Right. Yeah. It's not necessarily a permanent. Can I go back to curious, not furious for 1 second?
All day.
I'm trying now to collect other rhyming life advice. So far, I only have 3.
There's a cognitive bias that overvalues rhyming slogans because if they rhyme, they must be true.
Right.
Which makes no sense if you think about it.
If the glove don't fit, you have to quit.
I was exactly right. When the glove don't fit, you have to quit. That was a brilliant moment. Even though it was a tragic outcome for the jury.
That is hilarious. But sometimes they do work, not just because they rhyme. But
right. So let's hear yours. I'll give you a couple of mine.
All right. Well, there's Get Curious, Not Furious. I love comparing leads to despairing. So if you're always comparing, that person has more money than me, that person, their book sold 10,000 more copies than me, that is just a road to despair. So the idea of just trying to focus on your own happiness instead of keeping up with the Joneses. So that's a big one for me that I say to my kids all the time. But what else have you got?
Okay, I just want to comment on the comparing is despairing. It's the roadblock to happiness. I drive home in my brand new, wonderful car and my neighbor rolls in with his. And of course, his is twice as expensive. And so I think, gosh, I was so happy just a second ago with my car. And this isn't exactly a rhyme, but it kind of rhymes. But to that point, what we appreciate appreciates. And I like that because it's just very true. So in spite of the fact that I roll in my new Hyundai SUV and my neighbor rolls in the Mercedes version, if I can appreciate my Hyundai, what I appreciate appreciates. And we tend to desensitize from that new car smell within very little time. But if we can make it a meditation to each time turn that car on, say, I dig this thing. And as a 16-year-old, I couldn't have imagined having this car. But 2 of my favorite rhymes are, we've got to feel it to heal it. So numbness and dissociation, not helpful. We know this.
Great.
And then there is what we resist persists and gets worse. And I like, so there's actually, it's what we resist persists, ... and gets worse. But resist and persist, absolutely true. I mean, I've got a rock in my shoe, literal or metaphoric, and I can resist its reality. And probably if I'm going on a long walk and I have no recourse, probably better to resist it for a short period. But over time, that is actually going to cause podiatric, however you pronounce it, the podiatrist, it will cause foot trouble. So maybe don't resist getting rid of those
be okay with
literal and proverbial rocks in our shoe.
That's similar to, this is one piece of advice I give sometimes. And it came about because a few years ago, this guy I knew who had just had kids or just had his first kid. And he's like, when is the light at the end of the tunnel? Let's just give me, what age will I stop worrying? And I said, and I still, think of it because I think it was true. It's like, there is no end to the tunnel. The tunnel just keeps going. So get used to the lighting inside the tunnel. Learn to love those fluorescent lights inside the tunnel because that's what you're stuck with. And so like you said, just learn to appreciate what we have. Even if it's imperfect, it's never going to be perfect, but learn to savor the ups and downs of that tunnel.
Such a good point. And savoring isn't just a fluffy term. We actually use it in the positive psychological nomenclature. There is evidence that the act of savoring and being present with a thing makes you enjoy it a gazillion times more. I mean, how many times have you eaten something totally delicious while being on your phone? And does the phone enhance the taste? No, it dulls the taste buds. But if you're actually with that beautiful piece of New York cheese pizza from the best place and just close your eyes and let it unfold.
Right.
Oh my God.
What is the psychological definition of savoring? Because I just use it in a layman's, but what goes into savoring?
I'm not going to be able to give you the authoritative definition because I don't have it in front of me, but my best estimate is being present and fully enjoying and appreciating.
Yeah.
That would be my best.
Sounds right.
Yes. But the authoritative definition is certainly in some psychology dictionary.
You're my authority. I don't need anyone else.
Any other thoughts for, one of the great ideas came from, I'm guessing it's in the 18th century. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov wrote something so beautiful, basically saying, if we don't plan on doing better next year, then what's the point of next year? Of course, I'm paraphrasing this poorly, but I think it's a really good aspirational notion that betterment is crucial. And to borrow from my new friend, Jonathan Fader, a sports psychologist, he says, I'm not a shrink, I'm a stretch. And I like the idea of stretching. Like, how can we stretch into next year in some meaningful way? What else might be a good probe for people to access?
Well, what it triggered in my mind was a story I heard when I was writing The Year of Living Biblically, which was Nachshon. So not Nachman, but Nachshon. So they've got a similar name. But do you know that story?
I don't know anything about any Nachshon. It's another historic rabbi?
No, it is a character, and maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong, so you can tell me. I think it's in the Mishnah, which are legends about biblical events.
Interesting.
So it's not in the Bible, but a sort of
commentary.
Fable. Yeah, it's commentary. The story is that when Moses went to the Red Sea and raised his arms to part it, that the way they portray it in the movies is not the way it happened according to this legend. So in the movies, Moses lifts up his arms and immediately the Red Sea parts.
Yes.
But according to this legend, Moses lifted up his arms to part the Red Sea and nothing happened. And the Egyptian army was getting closer and closer. His followers were freaking out. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And this guy, this Hebrew named Nachshon, just decided to wade into the sea, even though it hadn't parted. And he got up to his knees, he got up to his thighs, he got up to his waist, and his chest. But right before he got up to his mouth, the sea parted.
Dude. So it's almost like, show me you're committed to doing this and then the sea will part.
Exactly. Like the rabbi who told it to me said, yeah, to make miracles happen, sometimes you just have to dive in. You have to wade in. You have to do it. You have to start and see what happens. So I always think of that when I'm starting something particularly intimidating. I just think, well, you know what? Maybe I should just wade in and maybe things will happen. I can't just wait on the shore all my life.
Like if I want to surf, I better surf.
Exactly.
You better get on the board. And I love that idea. This metaphor is really funny because it really describes levels of commitment and readiness in some ways. And this Nachshon guy who had the inspiration to say, I'm just going to go for it. You know, it's interesting how often we can get into an idea, but not really get into the work around the idea. So one of my clients, and this is not sharing anything private because he's unidentifiable, wanted a particular book. And it was, to his knowledge, the last version of that book or the last copy of that book in known existence. And it was going to inform his thinking or behavior. One of those two things. I don't want to say more than that. And the package was stolen. He gets into our session. He is bereft. And I asked him, okay, how badly did you want that book? And it was like a 10 out of 10. How likely do you think you would have followed the words of that book? And it was not actually all that likely. And I said, well, that book would have been just basically porn. It would not have been an actual roadmap for you. Maybe this is a test.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe this is a test. And maybe I was getting kind of spiritual, but really asking him his levels of commitment. Maybe it's a test for you to find that book somewhere else. And this time when you get it, you will actually put it into play.
Right.
That night later, I get a text from him. The book had been actually brought to a neighbor's house and the neighbor brought it to him and he said, I got the book. And I was like, that's right on, dude. Now you have to use it. So it's really,
that.
when I think of Not Shown, I think of that as well. Like it's all mythology or just words unless you actually go do the work. Lifting your arms is not going to do the same thing as walking into the ocean.
So true. Yeah. The book is just the start, right? Like you say,
Just
those are just words on the paper. You have to go and it's all about changing your behavior and changing your mind and jumping in.
And to borrow from J.R.R. Tolkien, leaving the Shire, leaving our comfort zone. Oh, it's so hard. Well, my good man, this has been, as promised, way too much fun. Is there any final thing that you want to share with my listeners, whether it's about something that you've done this year that has fortified your year, something else that you aspire to do? I know that you've done some really funny things over the course of the year that you couldn't have imagined doing, say, December 31st, 2021.
One note I thought I could bring up before we end is how grateful I am. I've written 2 articles this year for Men's Health, and in each of the articles, I have quoted you, Adam, and one of them I'll just bring up because it should be out any day if it's not already out. And it was, just to give you the background before I give you Adam's insights, which was at the start of the year, I decided to motivate myself. I would, instead of doing the normal 10,000 steps, which I had been doing for many years, I thought, well, what if I tried to mix it up, just make it more interesting? So what if I, instead of doing steps, tried to figure out how high I could walk? Because every day I'm on my treadmill and I have it at an incline of about 12%. So, and it records how much I walk. And
Vertically.
Vertically. So I walk the equivalent of about an Eiffel Tower every day, about 1,000 feet. And I thought, well, if I do that all year, that's about 300,000 feet. And I looked it up and that is the beginning of space. So I thought, well, that's fun. Why don't I try to walk to space this year? And I've had a great time and I started a Facebook page and there are about 30 other people walking to space. I actually haven't made it. A few of them have. I'm at like 200,000 feet. But I wrote the article and I called Adam to get some professional insight into what was going on here, why this was motivating. Well, I'll let you tell it since you...
Yeah, so you call me. I'm vacationing in Colorado with my family. As soon as I see it's from you, I'm like, oh my gosh, drop everything. It's AJ. And you asked me, why would that even catch fire? Why would the idea of walking to space be any different than other physical pursuits?
And you said?
I said, a thing is just a thing. It's how you conceptualize it in your head that makes all the difference. We are meaning-based creatures. And the idea of actually walking towards where Captain Kirk and Spock were, like getting to go to space with your feet. Oh, that's a game changer. It's how you couch it. And if you can make something fun or cool, we're all in.
So I've been thinking a lot about that. So the meaning-based, so trying to I'm going to try to have a meaning-based year. And yeah, you've been an inspiration for that.
Oh, AJ, thank you so much for saying that. And likewise, I will never, ever forget when I first heard your name. I was just walking my dog and somebody said, you got to read this book by AJ Jacobs. And I immediately bought it, couldn't believe it, the endorsement from Jon Stewart himself. And I thought, okay, already we've got a brother here. And then I proceeded to read The Know-It-All, which was my gateway drug to all things AJ. I've read all of your work. I've read all of your work at least once. As I've mentioned, it's the best bedtime reading with of course, the warning that you may wake up someone who's sleeping next to you if you have someone sleeping next to you. So be careful because it is funny, but it is very good to read for stretching our minds. So I am so grateful for what you've done to the literature, to our consciousness. And now to me as a personal friend, I'm just enjoying getting to know you and how you think and just can't wait to find out what's next for you at every juncture.
Wonderful. Same here. Well, thanks, and Happy New Year. And great to talk to you.
Right back at you, brother. This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.